And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the New Evaluation System Student Learning Objectives Overview tonight with David Deitz, consultant and educator from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us this evening. We are very excited to have David with us as part of our webinar series here at Pennsylvania AFERD. If you've never seen him speak before, he is outstanding, and I guarantee you're in for a treat tonight. He will cover the SLOs so thoroughly that you will know exactly what to do when you leave here tonight, we hope. If you are available next Tuesday as well, the second part of our SLO series will be conducted by Dr. Caroline Kaczynski of East Stroudsburg University. She's very active both at East Stroudsburg and in Pennsylvania AFERD. She's an Ethel Enke Award winner, and she will be covering in detail how to write an SLO. We'll be going through the template next week in a hands-on manner, and that will be next week. And once again, those are free for members and $20 for non-members, so we do hope that you join us next week. I have noticed that many of you have signed up for a membership here just in the last couple days as these webinar series were advertised, so we'd like to thank you all very much for joining us, and also like to let you know that with your membership, not only do you get these two webinars live, you'll get all future webinars for free, and we also have a webinars archive that is located on the Pennsylvania AFERD website, psahperd.org, and it is located in the members only section. You can see all of the archived webinars that we have done from the beginning of this project when we started it 1 year ago. So please do enjoy those. They play just like videos, and if you have any issues, certainly do not hesitate to email me. I'm Todd Bedard. I'm the webmaster for Pennsylvania AFERD, and I'd be happy to assist you in any way that I can if you do need help. Coming up in the future, we do have next month we will be holding Pennsylvania AFERD's first ever town hall meetings online. They will be open to members and non-members, so please tell your colleagues who are members and non-members if they'd like to join us. What the town hall meeting is going to be is basically I'm going to moderate it and run it kind of like town hall meetings do for politicians, and I'll ask some questions of our people that we'll have on that night, and we'll let them answer it, and we'll also take questions from you and suggestions from you, because we really want to make Pennsylvania AFERD the go-to place for health, physical education, recreation, and dance here in Pennsylvania. And we'd also like to make sure that we are covering what our members want. So that will be an opportunity for you. Anything goes that night, constructive criticisms, compliments, anything that night that you want to tell us about, we will have those, and they will be advertised on the website very soon as I confirm what nights everyone's available. And there will be more than one opportunity. So if you see it on a night that you can't make it, there will be several that month. And each one will be a little bit different. So if you can make them all, you'll probably get to hear them. And we're going to kind of keep them short and sweet, maybe a half hour at the most. Also coming up in the fall, we will be doing Pennsylvania AFERD's very first online leadership institute. That one is part of President Cindy Allen's presidential project this year. She is conducting that and currently acquiring speakers, and we will be advertising that very soon. That will be in the fall, probably the first couple weeks back to school, and it will be based largely on leadership in the fields of health, physical education, recreation, and dance. And also, speaking of the fall, our convention is coming up in November 21st through the 23rd. Information is posted on the website right now. Room rates and packages are available right now. The brochure is probably headed to print here next month, so you should see that coming up very soon. And we are taking a few last-minute presenters too. If you'd like to have your name in the program and you present at our convention, certainly do go to the website psahperd.org and fill out one of those presenter response forms, and we will get back to you and get you into our program in the fall. Well, ladies and gentlemen, like I told you tonight, you are in for a treat. David Deitz will tell you everything there is to know and more about the SLOs and the SLO process that is coming next year in the 14-15 school year. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, David Deitz.
Thanks, Todd. That was a pretty glowing introduction. I hope I can live up to it. And thanks also to Carolyn Kaczynski, who has solicited me to do some presentations, not just for this webinar, but also for the conferences that PSAFERD has had in the last 2 years. I really enjoyed going to Seven Springs 2 years ago, and contrary to music teachers, the way we go to a conference, and I come to you as a retired music teacher working as a consultant to the Department of Ed, when we go to conferences, we actually stiffen up a little bit. We wear our coats and ties and look very official. I really enjoyed an opening session where the opening speaker was a man who just run across the country and was throwing these soft frisbees while everyone was sitting there in their tracksuits, because I am also a long-distance runner and have run probably about 17 marathons and twice that many half marathons, so know a little bit about that drill. It was very entertaining and informational, and also helped me to get a better understanding of what I'm going to talk about with you this evening. So we're talking about teacher effectiveness in the student learning objectives process. And this webinar's presentation will start with a brief background on teacher evaluation, and then we're going to look at a 9th grade SLO model that is on our current training websites. And then I'm going to continue a little bit more with the background on the SLO process and how it comes to be. And then we'll do some awareness of available training and development materials for SLO. Hopefully we'll get that far. So first I would like you to understand that everything that has to do with teacher effectiveness is not something that just fell out of the sky. This is language that is legislated. It's legislated at the federal level through the Race to the Top language, Race to the Top being an Obama initiative where monies were given to schools to change certain aspects of the way in which education is delivered in their states. And a big chunk of that change is supposed to be in the area of teacher evaluation. And then in Pennsylvania, we have House Bill 1901, Act 82, which went into legislation on June 30th, 2012. And a lot of the language to support both the Race to the Top federal language and also the ESEA waiver that we now have in our state, which sort of guarantees and makes promises that we will implement these changes over the next year. This language is a part of House Bill 1901 and Act 82. So what we're talking about is information that is officially and technically legislated. So this particular chart is a pie chart, and you'll see on the left-hand side it says under the Teacher Effectiveness System in Act 82 of 2012, teachers with eligible PVAS data. You may know your colleagues in 4th through 8th grade math and ELA, or colleagues who teach Keystone exam-based courses. They would have something called value-added growth, and there will be attribution on their teacher evaluation that has to do with the standardized testing. We'll speak tonight primarily about teachers in non-tested or without eligible PVAS data teachers, because phys ed teachers and health teachers would come under that category. But to learn a little bit first about what teachers with eligible PVAS data will experience will help inform you about the experience that you'll have, and I'll show that in an upcoming slide. The left-hand side of the pie chart, it says observation practice 50%. And in Pennsylvania, the preferred method of doing teacher observation, a principal or a supervisor comes in to observe you and use a tool called the Danielson framework. And in the Danielson framework, of course, there are 4 domains. Principal would talk with you about your planning and preparation, and then would come to observe your classroom environment and your instructional procedures, and then would have a wrap-up discussion about professional responsibilities and also what they observed. And I'm sure that many of you are working under the Danielson system. Some of you might be, your schools might be using systems by Marzano or others. If your schools are choosing to do that, they can apply to the state to use the system that they're already using. And there are people there who read this information and determine if what you're doing is rigorous or as rigorous as the Danielson process. But teacher observation is something that we know about. It's been going on for 100 years. Somebody coming in to observe you and making decisions about whether or not you're a good teacher. Well, that used to be 100%. Now it's just going to be 50%. because we're in a multiple measure system. We want to now look at the right-hand side of the pie chart, and you'll see three areas there. These are multiple measures based on student achievement. Yes, and Scott just did a reminder there that if you have any questions, type them into the chat box. I can see it when it comes up one at a time, but Todd will interrupt me to make sure that I answer those questions. So on the right-hand side, you'll see there's something called building level data, and this is the blue section. And there are a couple of things in the upper right-hand corner listed under the blue section that are just some of the indicators that are a part of the school performance profile, which is how we gather building level data. If you don't know your school performance profile or information about it, I would suggest that you check with your principal and your administration. Each school has been issued a score based on things like indicators of academic achievement, of closing achievement gaps for all students and subgroups of students. Some of the PVAS information is in there, just a small percentage. Some other academic indicators and credit for advanced achievement. And don't panic when you read that and you say, but I teach in a K-2 school and we don't have a lot of these things. Just know that in the school performance profile, things that are appropriate to your building are attributed to your school performance profile. Things that are not a part of your building are not included in that profile. But please ask your principals about what your school performance profile number is if you haven't done that already. The teacher-specific data, the red section, this is looking at standardized testing and saying that based on standardized testing in standardized test areas, content areas, are students being kept on a trajectory for growth? So teachers will be looked at based on standardized testing to the 15% level on whether or not they're keeping their students on a trajectory for growth. These formulas are very complicated, but PVAS has been around for quite a long time, the Pennsylvania Value Added System. Your principals and your district administrators have probably been talking in the last couple of years about PVAS. Again, if you want to get more specifics, I would go to your administration to see what kind of information they can provide there. But PVAS data is based on standardized testing. Elective data, this is the crux of the matter this evening. The SLO, the Student Learning Objective Process, is the way in which we gather elective data, and it will be attributed to a teacher evaluation at the 20% level. And we look at district design measures and examinations. You can think of these as teacher-built tests. Hopefully they would be assessments and performance measures that teachers would build in a group. Let's say the phys ed department would be our preference at PDE, that the phys ed department in your school would get together and build some benchmark level tests and assessments to determine whether or not students are achieving Pennsylvania content standards in physical education and health. We also look at nationally recognized standardized tests. I know that there are some of these kind of protocols in HPE. The Fitnessgram program, I think, has some assessments in there. Obviously, you are phys ed and health people. You will know what's out there much better than I will. Again, a reminder, I come from music background, but in talking about the SLO, I've learned a lot of different things in different content areas, but would not say that I'm certainly an expert in content beyond music. So nationally recognized standardized tests can be used. Industry certification exams, these are primarily for career technical education schools. And student projects and student portfolios, certainly in areas like music, art, phys ed, family consumer science, some of the industrial arts programs, computer technology, things like that. We understand and know student projects and student portfolios, and we can use those kinds of projects, portfolios, and assessment designs, performance measures, as a part of looking at student achievement for the purposes of creating a measure of teacher effectiveness. This pie chart looks a lot like the last one, but you'll notice that the red section is now sort of a lighter green, and basically, I created this for you because teachers in health phys ed would not have PVAS data. So we're not sure yet how this is going to play out, and this might be news to some people who've heard my lecture in the past. We have been teaching for a little over a year that the elective data for teachers in non-tested areas would expand to 35%. As our legal department at the Department of Education continues to review legal language based on what's being created at the Department of Education to support teacher evaluation, the opinion is possibly that the teacher-specific data may need its own separate section even for teachers in non-tested areas. So very simply, it means that instead of having one SLO expanded to the 35% level, teachers in non-tested areas may experience two SLOs, one at the 20% level and one at the 15% level. Just like you, I am anxiously awaiting to hear what the legal opinion is going to be on that, because I want to train this correctly, but I must confess it's still hanging in limbo. But it just really means that the process you're going to learn is the same. You would just apply it twice. So that's the 35% chart that we've been teaching. And this is just a reminder to say that the Student Learning Objectives, SLO, is a process through which these performance measures are used to gather data for the elective portion, and in your case, possibly for the teacher-specific portion as well. So what is a Student Learning Objective, an SLO? And it's quite true. Across the country, SLO is the acronym, except in New Jersey. New Jersey uses SGO, Student Growth Objective, and a lot of the reason that I heard from some of their administrators was they didn't like the acronym SLO. And of course my joke is, well, my wife and my friends are not surprised that I'm the lead for a SLO project. The Student Learning Objective is a process to document a measure of educator effectiveness based on student achievement of content standards. Well, that can be a mouthful. Let's start with the end in mind, much like Understanding by Design curriculum models as espoused by Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe. And let's go to the end. And let's talk first, number one, about content standards. Do you know Pennsylvania content standards in health and physical education? Standard number 10. And if my memory serves correctly, 10.1, 2, and 3 are basically formulated around health, and standard 10.4 and 10.5 are formulated around physical education. What is in those content standards? What do the curriculum frameworks that support and organize those content standards look like? Going to the state website, the state curriculum website, which is pdesas.org, again that's pdesas.org, is a good place to go to find the curriculum standards if you don't have them printed out somewhere in your school. And item number 2, thank you, Todd. Item number 2, what does student achievement of content standards look like? Very early on, I was reading some models from across the country. Early on meaning 2 years ago. I was reading models in phys ed across the country, and I was looking at things like the president's physical fitness test, and I thought, oh, well, they're sort of a nationally recognized test. And as I was speaking with some health and phys ed folks from your organization, some of your leadership, they were able to explain to me that just flat out using that test would not meet Pennsylvania standards. And they demonstrated and showed me why there was not a good connection of trying to discern student achievement based on the content standards by using the president's physical fitness test. Now, I think that there are parts of that you might be able to use, but I learned from these folks that you really need to understand the standards to understand what's there so that you understand what student achievement would actually look like. And some of the questioning, soul searching that I hope you'll take with you after this webinar this evening is the notion of whether or not your own particular assessment pieces are actually assessing student achievement of the content standards. So then we want to look at number 3, a measure of educator effectiveness based on student achievement of content standards. To put this very simply, we're saying student achievement is teacher achievement. And I've read a couple of white papers from across the country that are kind of interesting, and they will say that music teachers and coaches understand this idea the best, because you have to put out what you've taught in front of the world to see, and particularly coaches, if it's a game situation or a contest situation, there's a win or a lose. So understanding what student achievement looks like and measuring your own effectiveness based on student achievement is not so foreign to coaches and music people in particular. The idea of documenting this stuff, I find, runs the gamut with my own colleagues in music. Some people are very good at documenting what student achievement is like for their students and their classes, but others are sort of like, oh, I know how they sing, I know how they play, and I'm sure you might find the same gamut in your profession, that some people will be very good at documenting and others will be just sort of like, well, I know how good they are at this or that. And finally, number 5, to understand that this SLO, although you're going to see a lot of tools and a lot of templates, it's really just a process that I think of as a bridge. We're trying to bridge the idea of student achievement and applying that to teacher evaluation. So the bridge, the process, is called the student learning objective. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to an SLO template based on a grade 9 health and physical education model. And if you don't quite understand everything you see and hear, don't panic, because I'll go back over some of the philosophical supports of the system, but I think sometimes it's best to visualize, what is it that I have to do first? Well, you have to create a template. You have to fill out a form, you have to fill out a template, you have to think about how you would assess this student achievement that we're talking about, and then how you would apply it to teacher evaluation. And I use the word you. It could be in your district, you personally, or it could be you collectively working with members of your department. So I use you for both meanings. And this particular model is actually on our professional development website for the student learning objectives, and I will take you out there in a few minutes to show you how to access all of this. So the template obviously is an online template. There's a Word document there that you can download, but I've broken it up into the individual sections for ease of read as a part of this webinar. So we have a fictitious name here, Suzanne Goldsmith, and in her classroom context, she is at Harris High School, also fictitious, in the Harris School District, and she teaches physical education to grade 9. And when it says total number of students, this is the total number of students in the being used for the purposes of data collection for the SLO. I'm sure that Suzanne Goldsmith probably teaches many, many more students, but in her 9th grade classes, she has 70 of them. Maybe she has 4 sections, or 3 sections, and about 25 in a section. A typical class size, well, she says here is 20, and so she meets them every day for 1 quarter. So this might be, this is a unique design. Obviously, she sees them for 45 minutes in a row. Possibly they don't have phys ed the rest of the year, or possibly they move on to another style of phys ed, another content-specific design for phys ed. And she sees them for 45 minutes. So this is the classroom context, sort of stepping back and looking and saying, how often do I see students? How much do I see them? What kind of groupings do I see them? How much opportunity and time do I have to actually teach students? And then the next part we look at is the SLO goal. And our training will teach you to go to the standards and to the curriculum framework and take a look at some of the designs there. The curriculum framework is built around big ideas that are broken up into essential questions, that are broken up into concepts, and are broken up into competencies. And this work a couple of years ago, maybe 6-7 years ago, was guided by the work of Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe, who developed a process called Understanding by Design. It's basically about thinking with the end in mind. What's the end goal for student learning? Well, in this course, the goal statement is that participation in physical activity impacts wellness throughout a lifetime. And that you will find that statement as a part of the big ideas in the curriculum framework for physical education. And we have 4 standards that are being addressed here. 10.4.9.A, which is to analyze and engage in physical activities that are developmentally, individually appropriate and support achievement of a personal fitness and activity goal. And 10.4.9.B, to analyze the effects of regular participation in moderate to vigorous physical activities in relation to adolescent health improvement. 10.4.9.C, analyze factors that affect the responses of body systems during moderate to vigorous physical activities. And 10.4.9.D, analyze factors that affect physical activity preferences of adolescents. And why is this a good goal statement? Developing a solid foundation of knowledge and skills is necessary to lead a healthy lifestyle. I personally can relate to this goal statement page. I am a person who is short in stature. In 9th grade, I can say that going out and playing football was about the last thing in the world I wanted to do, because I don't enjoy getting, tackled and slammed around or that kind of stuff with bigger kids. Or I guess I should say bigger adults now. So anything a phys ed teacher could have done to steer me in a way that I would do something healthy for the rest of my life would have been important at that point in time. Didn't happen until I was about 30. So the performance measure. This is basically the assessment. And this person says, I'm going to look at 2 different assessments. One called a physical activity student log and reflection task, and a second one that the person, Suzanne, has named. Did you lose my screen?
Yeah, just reshare there, Dave. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what happened there, but
I'm not sure either.
if
Okay.
it's still on your screen, it says stop sharing, and then just reshare. You should be okay.
Okay. All right. Are we back on? I have my screen up. If everybody's got it, I'm good.
It's still thinking on our end.
Huh? It's still thinking on your end.
Yeah. Hang on just a second
I should not be permitted to touch technology.
here. If you click stop sharing on yours for a second, and then we'll just start over. Maybe that's.
Okay. Let me go to. Okay. 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 So, all right. People are saying yes. I'm sorry. I really don't know what happened. I'm holding my hands in my lap in between screens. So this person, Suzanne, she has determined that these 2 pieces that she's created and provided names for are what she's going to use to demonstrate student achievement of the standards in this 45-day phys ed class. And these are student projects and portfolios, as you can see over in 3B where it says type. I probably could have highlighted district design measures and examinations because these were teacher-built pieces. And what's the purpose? Well, this assessment number 1, the purpose is to evaluate students' knowledge and application of health-related fitness components. And number 2 is to evaluate students' knowledge of the principles, components, and practices of health-related physical fitness as they relate to a variety of physical activities. And we talk about a metric, a growth metric. If you're going to look at growth, you need to look at change over 2 points in time. If you see students for 45 days, it might be tough to see certain kinds of change, particularly physical change, certainly attitude change, certainly process change you might be able to look at. But Suzanne is just looking at mastery. These assessments, students are expected to reach a certain point and do a certain, just want to do certain well on the assessments that are created. We also have an opportunity that you could look at. Some assessments could be growth, some assessments could be mastery, and we've even figured out how to use rubrics to look at growth. So administration frequency, this first piece is done during the last week of the quarter, and the second piece is done during the second week of the quarter. It might seem a little early, but if I remember correctly, this the first piece is somewhat predicated on completing something in the second week of the quarter, which is the second item. Obviously, for adaptations and accommodations, by law, you must deal with IEP and ELL accommodations, 504, probably some others. I don't think there's anything that's being provided here for gifted IEP students, and nothing other was listed. So, the resources and equipment. For the first one, first assessment piece, you need a personal fitness activity participation log or journal form, and she provides students with a rubric so that they know how they will be scored at the end. Kind of an interesting aside here. I had a teacher in another content area say, well, if you give students the scoring rubric, aren't you giving away the secrets of the test? And my response was, why should a test be a secret? We should understand what we're supposed to understand for a test, and then we should be successful when we do it. So to give students rubrics is actually a good educational practice so that they understand the quality levels at which they are expected to work. The second one, my personal fitness, is a student portfolio and a rubric. Those are some resources that you need. 3H, the scoring tools. The assessment pieces will both be scored by separate rubrics. And 3I, the administration and scoring personnel. We say for both of these that a certified physical education teacher would administer and score all the performance tasks. We're not expecting that principals would come in and score people's work. I'm encouraging people to write their SLO processes and their assessment processes in such a fashion as if to say, if you were not permitted, and we're not saying this at the state level, but a school district could say this, and some states and some school districts across the country are saying this, if you were not permitted to administer or score your SLO, who would be the appropriate person to do it, or score your assessments and your student achievement and your performance measures? A certified physical education teacher. It should not be just somebody brought in off the educational street. It's somebody who needs to understand teaching and learning for 9th grade phys ed and also understand the phys ed standards. So the performance reporting, at the end of the day, the question is, how many of the students, how many of these 70 students achieved what they were supposed to achieve? And you want to give a summary list. It's almost like here's a list of names out of the 70. These 62 students achieved well enough on the first one, and these 68 students achieved well enough on the second performance measure. I call that green bucket, red bucket. You want to get student achievement into the green bucket for teacher evaluation. You want to get a certain number of students who are successful at these measures, but you want your measures to be quality measures and to truly assess the standards, student understanding of the standards. So, I'm jumping now away from the SLO template and going to a side template that we have for teachers who want to build assessments. And this is called a performance measure template. And I'm just going to show you some parts of this, because let's take a look at that physical activity student log and reflection. What does this piece look like? So this teacher is going to hang their hat on student achievement of this particular assessment piece. Well, what does it really look like? And I won't read all of this stuff. You can go back and reread it. You can find all of this online, and I will show you where. But the first thing we have at 2A is task scenarios, and it says students will complete a weekly log indicating their participation in physical activity both during and outside of school. And then there's some process steps, and these are just saying, what does a student have to do to complete the assessment? For bubble-in test, they have to sit down, have a number 2 pencil, fill in the bubble in, turn in the Scantron sheet. The product is, here's a Scantron sheet. But in projects and portfolios, it gets a little bit more involved. So you want to think, what is it that a student has to do to complete the assessment that I've put in front of them? And then the next part, the scoring tools. And this was a nicer rubric. It didn't fit as well as I'd hoped on the PowerPoint system. But you can see that the rubric scoring, this is one of the criteria called participation level. And this is the criteria for a 4, and then there's 3 criteria for a 3, and 3 for a 2, and 4 criteria for a 1, obviously being the weakest. And those numbers and that criteria will have importance later on in the SLO process. Now, I'm not going to argue or even discuss whether or not these are quality criteria. That's for phys ed people in your departments to discuss and determine what is appropriate scoring criteria for student learning in our school district physical education program. A second criteria was something about log completion, and these are the statements that support log completion. And I'll just move on from that for time's sake. And then another part was the quality of journal reflection. And those were the 3 criteria. Now, the question you'll want to go back and really look at this is to say, are the things that are in these criteria based on the standards? Are we assessing students on the standards with our scoring tools in addition to our assessments? My easiest example is a social studies teacher that I worked with who had a pretty good civics and government writing prompt. The prompt was really pretty good, but the scoring tool was all about English language arts. Did you spell the words correctly? Did you write 2 paragraphs or whatever? And it was 10 criteria on ELA, and I said to this person, I said, based on your scoring tool, I don't know if students learned about civics and government. I only know if they can spell words correctly and do all of these ELA things. So you want to make sure that while those are rich learnings for students to have, we certainly want students to come out of school knowing how to spell, knowing how to construct sentences and write well-crafted paragraphs. You want to make sure that you're scoring students on information and content that is in the standards, that supports the standards, because the SLO process is designed to honor the fact that you teach in a particular content area. Some other states started their teacher evaluation information by saying, we're going to have all the teachers select either ELA or math, all the teachers in non-tested areas select either ELA or math. Then if they would say, we'll have your multiple measures of student achievement would be based on how well students did in ELA or math. And I would complain because I would say that, well, I'm a music teacher and I don't teach that content area. So the SLO process and the elective portion is really designed to honor what you do as a content teacher. We look at performance indicators, and performance indicators are really just statements of how well do we expect students to do based on the scoring tools for the performance measures. And this teacher says, I expect students to achieve a level 4 or 3 on all dimensions of the physical activity, student log, and reflection task. And now I've jumped back into the SLO template, by the way.
Hey,
and
Dave,
then they also, yes.
Hey, we have a couple of questions that are popping up, and 3 or 4 in a row about the students, so I can just come down the line with you if you don't mind.
Sure, I can do that.
The first one was Ron had asked, will the students be assessed or just a selection? And when I had taken the training from the pilot, we were told 100 students was the max. Is that still correct?
We're going to put out some guidance that says you don't really need to collect beyond 80 to 100 students if you are a teacher, as many of you folks are who teach, in excess of 100. But even that might be a little high. But what I'm finding is people are saying we use these performance measures for student grades anyway. So I teach this to 200 kids. I'm just going to use all of them in the SLO process. And quite frankly, mathematically, the more students you have in your data pool, the better you're going to get from your data results. But yeah, we'll put out some guidance, but probably not until about June.
Okay, and then off of that, there was a question that said, what is the minimum then number of students? We didn't have one of those in the pilot because a lot of teachers we found, some of them had rosters of 5 and 6 or even 10 kids.
Yeah. Well, when we're in Phys Ed, I don't think minimum should be too much of a problem. I know that PVAS, for the purposes of the PVAS reporting, they're looking at like 11.
Okay.
We know that some teachers, particularly in special ed situations, have some very low numbers of students, and that situation has been thrown to the legal office to say, what guidance would you like us to put out on that? So I'm not prepared to go with specifics. I know some generalities of where we're talking about, but specifics will come from legal.
Okay, this next question comes from Pam Wiley. Is there an expected date when PDE Legal will decide if teachers without PVAS scores will be writing 2 SLOs, and will teachers with PVAS scores only be writing 1?
Well, first of all, the idea of 2 and 1, some of that is going to be a local education association decision. A lot of things around SLO are going to be local education association decisions. Your school district will determine how they want to implement this. If a school district is looking to do the minimum, obviously 1 would be the minimum. And legal may determine for teachers in non-tested areas that 2 would be the minimum. I don't know when that's going to come out. I'm trying to push them every day, but you can only push so far and so hard. Some teachers, oddly enough, said, I think we should have lots of SLOs, because what if one turns out to not get the results that we'd hope, then we'll have some others to buffer the process. So in the elective component of the teacher evaluation rating tool, we are leaving up to as many as 5 SLOs, and you can even weight those SLOs inside the process to say this one carries more weight than another one. An example might be, let's say you teach, your 3/5 of your teaching is 9th grade Phys Ed, and 2/5 of your teaching is 9th grade health. Let's say that's your job. And so you would say, I'm going to do an SLO for health, I'm going to do 1 for Phys Ed, and the Phys Ed one would be rated at 60%, and the health one would be rated at 40%. That's one way to look at the process. There are lots of ways to look at multiple SLOs and lots of ways to look at weighting within that system.
Okay.
And those would all be LEA decisions.
Okay. Let's see. Next one comes from Jennifer Bickler. Any students from the roster, or are we targeting a specific group of students?
Yes, you're going to see on this slide right now that we provide opportunity to target certain groups of students that live, that are in like the total number of students, but they, for some reason or another, like historical data or pretest data or something like that, would not meet the performance indicator level that you would expect from most of the students. So you put them in a targeted group and they would have different performance indicator level, which is the slide I'm on now.
Okay. There's three or four more on the list. Do you want to
Okay.
continue and then we can stop in a bit, or do you want me to keep going?
Well, why don't I go through, and then when we get to the next section, we'll stop and take some more questions. A lot of
Yeah.
those questions are very, what I would call policy questions, and the guidelines and policy are not quite out yet. We are asking people to this year in the pilot just basically to learn the SLO process, to learn how to do it. I equate it to if you do strength training, you can play lots of different games. So, however the policy would turn out, if you've done the strength training, if you've learned how to do the process, you'll be able to implement it appropriately in your for your personal SLO or within your department and your school district. So, you notice that she was talking about 70 students, and we're talking now about we might have the all-student group. For her is just the 70 students. She's not isolating any particular group of students. But you could say that that there's some reason why there are 4 or 5 kids in your class who for good reason, when they take this assessment, basically aren't going to jump as high as you would expect kids to jump after they've had instruction with you. And you can put them in a focus student group, and if they can meet the targets that you set for them, they end up, or their data ends up in your green bucket. We have this thing called linked, and linked has probably you won't do that in phys ed, but it has to do with like safety measures and things like that. Think of driving. Linked means like you take that computerized test that says you know the rules of the road, then you go out and you take another test that says you know how to operate a car in relationship to the rules of the road. Those two, you have to pass both those tests in order to get a driver's license. None of us on this webinar want somebody who knows that the red octagonal sign means stop, but will hit the gas pedal when they see it. We don't want those people on the road. So those assessments must be linked. And then the weighting, you can also weight individual performance measures within an SLO. So these 2 performance measures and performance indicators for this SLO don't have to be of equal weight. Suzanne chose them to be of equal weight, but they wouldn't have to be of equal weight. One could hold more weight than another. And then we get to section 5, which is the elective rating. And so now, basically in section 4, you've said, I expect students to jump this high based on the performance measure, and here's my performance indicator. I want them to do this well, and she said that she wanted them, based on the rubric scoring, I expect them to get to these levels of achievement on the criteria. We know that no matter how hard we try, not all students, not 100% of students, meet the performance expectations we put in front of them. But in line with the Danielson rating, we want to say, what are the percentages that we would expect students to achieve? So she's saying that she would be a proficient teacher if 85 to 94% of the students would meet the performance indicator targets that she set for them. And that would include, differentiated targets for students in that focused group. If they meet the target set for them, they would be counted in your green bucket toward the 85%. We're keeping the numbers pretty small at the top end because that's staying in line with the Danielson, the Danielson thinking that teachers visit distinguished, they don't live there. I want to argue with Charlotte Danielson on some of that, but not my job at this moment. And then for the elective rating, if 70 to 84% of the students would meet these targets, she would say she was a needs improvement teacher. And if less than 70 met those targets, she would say she was a failing teacher for her elective rating. Now, when we sit down and we go down to 5B, all that means is that if you get, let's say, a proficient rating on your student achievement data, then you would get a number 2 assigned to your SLO in the elective component of the teacher evaluation rating tool. So it's just that 5B just shows you what number gets plugged in to the teacher evaluation rating tool based on the student achievement data found in 5A. So to understand that every teacher designs an SLO, I put this slide in as a reminder because some people say things like, well, we only write an SLO in our differentiated supervision year. That's not true. You're responsible for an SLO every year. Can it be the same one year after year? LEA decision. I would think the rich way to use the process is to do sort of a big look at something one year and then say, based on the criteria, on what criteria are my students weakest, and then next year write an SLO to support improved teaching and learning of that criteria, and then come back and do a big one every so often. This is what would really improve teaching and learning, to my way of thinking. And just some basic concepts. I hopefully am preaching to the choir here in that student achievement can be measured in ways that reflect authentic learning of content standards. We don't have to give kids what I would call unrealistic and non-authentic and fake and hokey bubble-in tests or writing assessments to demonstrate that they have learned phys ed content, for example. We can measure them in authentic ways to the phys ed standards. And then the flip-flop is that educator effectiveness can be measured through use of student achievement measures. That's hard for those teachers who have espoused their entire careers that you'll be lucky if you get a C in my class. Of course, my first response is, when did learning start with luck? Learning is a process that involves teaching, and so I think teachers who are espousing that you'll be lucky if you get a C in my class might want to rethink their educational practice. An SLO big idea is that we can use student achievement on the assessments listed below to measure teacher effectiveness, and we have looked at what those 5 different types are. Those are just the titles that are listed in legislative language. I think that those titles pretty much cover about any kind of assessment that a teacher might develop or find or review and apply for student achievement. I do have to be a little careful. Music teachers sometimes want to look at aptitude assessments, and aptitude assessments are not predicated on students learning. They're predicated on what students do naturally. They might be okay for a pre-test, but certainly would not be good to demonstrate student learning. So I'm going to escape from this for a moment. I'm going to go out to the pdesas.org website, but when we get there, we're going to find these things. We're going to find the homeroom, which is a part of the website built to support SLO and assessment literacy, meaning what does it mean to create, develop, or review a quality assessment. That's what assessment literacy is. And we'll look at that website briefly. And you're going to find that in the website, the homeroom website, everything is built under a design, build, review kind of process. Think like a house. You design a house, you get somebody to build it, and then somebody comes in and checks it to make sure that it's okay for occupancy. And behind each of these buttons, we have 4 stripes where we have training videos. They're actually PowerPoints right now. The videos won't be up until the end of May. We're in the process of creating the scripts and getting those videos put together. And then we have some guides that are like what I showed you tonight. They're templates that are filled out so that you can see what a completed template looks like. And then we have templates that are just blank, and you can download them, fill them out, use them for your SLO process. And then we just have materials that we found that we think help teachers to better understand the process. If anything, we have too much material at this point, I think. So, and there are some other SLO resources. So if you want to ask a question or two while I go to I'm going to escape this for the moment and go out to the SAS portal.
All right. Dave, can you still hear me? I think we lost your sound for a minute. Check your sound there. So while Dave gets his sound back, I'll run through a couple of these questions. Let's see here. Let's go back. All right, so Dave, the first question, if you have your sound back, is from Ron's question: Is it a selection that is used for the SLO measurement, or do you truly only assess a select few from your roster? So let's see. I'm going to pause the recording for a second.
So anyway, let me back up a little bit. We were looking on the SAS portal on the home page, and in the lower right hand corner is the homeroom student learning objectives, and you can click on that, and then I suggest clicking on homeroom. The box below is really for IU trainers, and it takes you out to an external site. When you do it, you may get a login page. We're keeping it on an external site this year while we're developing it, and then we'll have it transferred directly into the SAS portal, so you won't have so many clicks to get to it. But you want to learn about the Student Learning Objectives box, and you want to learn about the assessment literacy. What does it mean to build a quality assessment? So I'm going to open the Student Learning Objectives box, and you'll see there are the design, build, review buttons that I showed you in the webinar part, in the PowerPoint part. I'm going to click on Build. If you click on videos, you won't see any videos. They're PowerPoints, but hopefully by the end of May, our videos will be done and we'll have videos up. And you can open one of these and you can see that there's a PowerPoint that will teach you about building an SLO. Certainly you want to learn about designing one first. And you'll see there's a lot of jargon underneath them. It's trainer notes. If you had to train them, these are some of the things that you'd want to think about to present to your faculty, to your department. Just some notes to help you understand what the slides are about. They were written for intermediate unit trainers, and we decided to put them in to share with everybody. So, next, let me get out of this, and I'll hit return. And you'll see now that I'm in the build button. I'm in this blue build button for SLOs. I'm going to go to guide, see the cheat sheets, and you will see that at this point we have 12 models up. Again, you can debate the content among yourselves, but we believe that the models are put together from a process standpoint correctly. We vetted them to just make sure the process is correct. But the content and the actual information that's in some of the assessments is, everybody's going to have a different opinion on whether it's of quality or not of quality or appropriate to what you might do. Eventually, this page will be a series of drop downs, and you'll click on one that will have several different phys ed and health models. You'll have your own drop down. Again, that will be about a year in coming before we have it built out that far. We've really only been working on all of this for about a little under a year. So we've been going at the speed of lightning to work with our SLO process. Some of you on the webinar may have been a part of some of the original phys ed groups that we pulled together. You'll see some of the statements throughout these models as you look at the phys ed models. And then you can see if you want to build an SLO, I would look right now at SLO template number 4. This is a downloadable version of what I just showed you. You can download this, save it to your computer, fill it in on your own. Why is that coming up? There we go. And so this would be the template that I just showed you. You can download it, you can type into it. It's just a Word document, that's all it is. So I'll click out of that and get out of that. And then the performance task framework that I showed you, sections of that, the same thing. You can download that and fill that in. I won't do that now. This particular piece is an online template. Our pilot schools are using it. You may use it as well. You can do your SLO online. what does it mean, class frequency? So I click on that little question mark, and up comes a stripe that explains to me, come on, what class frequency means. And we have in the training materials all of these individual statements in downloadable form for you as well. You just have to go through the RIA, the homeroom materials, to find out what all of that means. So that's like the world's fastest preview of the homeroom website. And now I'd like to ask, are there any questions that you might have that I could finish to finish off this webinar, because I know we're a little over time already, and I apologize for the technical glitches.
No problem there, David. Let me run back through here and just run through the questions from the chat room. Let's see. Backing up far enough. All right, from Ron's earlier question about how many, is it the selection that are used for the SLO measurement, or do you truly assess just a select few from your roster? So I think he's asking, are we assessing all of our students, or can we assess a random sample from our roster?
You can do a random sample, but let's say you teach 10 sections of 9th grade phys ed. Certainly you could pick 4 or 5 sections and use them. I would select them randomly. I would not try to handpick. If I were a principal, and principals are very much a part of this process, and you can go on the homeroom website and find out some of the things that they do as a part of this process. They monitor this stuff, and if I were a principal, I would ask why you're cherry picking, basically. So.
Okay. This one's from Brian. It says, seems like this is a secondary expectations. What about elementary? With grading pass-fail, I can see problems with getting students to do outside assignments.
Well, I think that the model you saw was one that was predicated on outside assignments. I would suggest that you go and look at the 3rd grade model that is on the SLO build guides section, that list of 12. There's a 3rd grade PE model that might better inform you there.
Okay. This one's from Kathy. Children with IEP accommodations, do we make accommodations in the rubrics for scoring?
I think what you want to do is if students have IEPs and you would adjudicate that they might not meet the targets that you're expecting, the majority of your students to meet, you would put them in the focus group, and you would have a different target. I don't think that you would change the assessment.
Okay. This one's from Laurie. And,
let me back up. Think of it like the high jump, or I often use slides that have a high jump in it. I might not be able to, or a hurdle, let's say. I'm short. I'm just on the basis of the fact that my legs aren't very high. I might improve my hurdling, but I might not hurdle as high as most of the kids in the class. It's simplistic, I know, but I think the visual of hurdling kind of speaks to it. So even though we're all going to do hurdles, you're not going to set mine as high, because I'll hurt myself. Okay?
Okay. Let's see. And this one's from Laurie. It says, if we teach multiple grade levels, do we get evaluated on one of those grades or all of those grades? I assume that we will write SLOs for all, but are they all evaluated?
I don't think initially that you would write for all grades, but now if you're teaching classes that have multiple grades inside the class, then your course probably has a title like, a high school phys ed, for example, and you might have 9th through 12th graders in there. You could write SLOs that would reflect the expected achievement for the different grade levels, if that was appropriate. I think you just have to reflect on the ways in which you deliver your class or course, and then you have to perceive what assessments are appropriate for what students. So if you're teaching gymnastics, let's say there's a a quarter class in gymnastics. You might have 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, and it might be appropriate to have targets of learning for all those different grade levels. Then again, you might perceive that you have to have different targets for each of the different grade levels. I think that this is where the teachers and the departments have to get involved in determining, what's best practice, what's best educational practice.
Okay. This one's from Pam. Does PDE require the use of the SLO template?
Apparently from legal, they do. We found this out about a week and a half ago. So yes, they require the use of that template. Now, there are still let's say there's some still questions being asked about that, and I did have one meeting last week about this, and am awaiting my next meeting.
All right, good. Let's see. This one's from Lorraine. It says, can you repeat when the decision for the SLO for special education students with IEPs be made?
I don't think I gave a specific date. I just said that we were in process. I can tell you that I have a meeting March 28th about this,
Okay.
and I'm sure that meeting will spawn many, many more, and hopefully quickly.
Okay. And then last question in the chat room, although there are a few more coming in. Is this PowerPoint available for sharing?
I can send this PowerPoint. Well, Todd, I sent it to you.
Yes, I
Didn't
have.
I?
I'll share it. I won't share
Yes.
it with your permission. So.
You can put this PowerPoint, you can put this webinar on your PS AFERD website.
Okay.
I know that that's what PMEA, PAEA, the Music Ed and the Art Ed, Family Consumer Science, they've all taken the webinars I've done for them and the PowerPoints, and they have a spot on their site where they house this stuff. So, sure.
Great. All right.
Yeah,
Folks,
we don't do secrets.
Okay, that sounds great. Folks, we're getting ready to wrap up. I see one more question came in from Holly, but if you have any more questions, just jump in that chat box and send them in to us. We'll get Holly's question answered, and then we'll wrap it up if there aren't any more. All right, so this one's from Holly, David. It says, little confused on the time frame of the SLO and the number of units or lessons it should encompass. What is recommended?
Well, we're trying to get people, based on best practice that we're learning nationally, to not think in terms of the unit, but what's the important learning in your course after students have experienced several units. Now, you could use some of your unit type assessments as the demonstration of student achievement for the SLO. The time frame thing, I'm always going to advocate for the longest time frame possible, because that's the best way to see student growth and or mastery over the longer period of time. You can see that students change over a long period of time. But the truth is that we're going to have some people who teach courses that are 45 days long, or I see students every other day for 45 days, or I see students once a week every 6-day cycle. That's a very common elementary pattern. So while it's a whole year, you might only see students 32 times. So that's why we have that context area in the front, so that you can sort of frame for yourself, how much do I see students and what's realistic for their achievement given the amount of time that I have to teach them. So the time frame is it's a tough one to answer. I say try to give yourself as much time as possible, but in some cases time has not been allocated in ways that we all would hope. I'm a music teacher, I understand that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, David. I appreciate you being a part of Pennsylvania AFERD once again. As always, you're informative, and I thought you knocked it out of the park tonight, and I'm always enjoyed listening to you speak. So thank you so much for being a part of this and helping us understand this process for next year.
Thank you for running the technology, and my apologies for the technology glitches, and also my apologies for talking at the speed of light so that I could get through everything.
I think it went perfectly, and I'm going to send these recordings out, folks, probably within the hour. As soon as I sit here and compose the email and get the PowerPoint squared away, you'll have the recording of this webinar and the PowerPoint available to you. And I'm sure we'll probably be twisting David's arm to appear at our convention in the fall. So stay tuned. We might see him in the program. And once again, thanks
Cool.
so much,
Thanks.
David, and thanks everyone for being a part of this webinar tonight. If you haven't yet signed up for next week's webinar with Caroline Kaczynski, she's going to run through the template in detail, and we're going to go through what it's like to make one and create one, and that'll be next Tuesday night at 6:30 right here, same place. So go to the website, psafer.org, and sign up. Thanks again, everyone.